Welcome to another episode of I Catch Killers. I think it would be fair to say most of us consider ourselves law-abiding citizens. We never think we would hurt people or end up in jail. Jail is only for the bad people. Well, the thing about life is we all make mistakes. Sometimes those mistakes have devastating consequences, as you will see with today's guest. Today's guest has agreed to come on I Catch Killers to tell a deeply personal story. She is not asking for anyone's sympathy. She made a mistake that destroyed lives. And she knows she'll be living with that guilt for the rest of her life. But if any good can come from this tragedy, it is warning people of the consequences of decisions and actions. Today's guest was living a pretty good life. She had just turned 50. Like a lot of people, her life was going through some changes, having recently separated from a high-profile husband, Parramatta CEO Dennis Fitzgerald. She'd been out with friends for lunch, where she had been drinking. She got a lift home, and an hour or two after getting home, made a decision that destroyed many lives. She got in a car and drove, whilst affected by alcohol, and struck a family of 4, causing serious injuries to the family. It was from that moment her life would never be the same. Today's guest, who had never been in trouble before, had only recently been released from prison. The horror of her experiences in jail is secondary to the guilt she still feels about the impact her actions had on the injured family, and at how it affected her own family. She has bravely agreed to talk about what she's been through. This story is very painful to discuss, as I found out when I first started talking to today's guest. But it's an important story to tell. It's a cautionary tale for all of us. By relieving the horror of what occurred that fateful day, our guest hopes others might not make that mistake. Sometimes we all need a wake-up call, and listening to today's guest certainly provides that. Lisa Mottram, welcome to I Catch Killers.
Hi, Gary.
It's a pretty heavy way to introduce someone, Lisa, and I do thank you for coming on. And I think it's important up front that the thing that I said in the introduction, and that's from discussions that I've had with you, you're not coming on to get sympathy.
No.
You understand that you were punished for a crime, and that it's had an impact on people's lives. But you also have said to me, and it's genuine in the way that you've said it, that you want to get your story across so others can learn from it.
Yes, I just think it's very important. I think if everybody is to be honest, they've all jumped in their car after consuming alcohol, and just the level as the time goes on after you've been drinking, you don't think about that.
Yeah. It's a social crime. I would describe it, and society's changing. But I remember growing up, and it was everyone drank and drove, and it was the norm.
Yes,
that was your parents. It was people would laugh at it that someone would be driving their car after consuming alcohol. But we're starting to learn. But it's situations like you've found yourself in that is the real wake-up call. And it's not just alcohol. It could be talking on the phone or being distracted in another way or speeding.
Yes,
and
yes.
the impact that it can have. But how long ago since you got out of prison?
November 28 last year.
Okay, so you haven't been out that long. How are you coping?
It's very difficult. It's very hard adjusting. It's because when I was in there, I had to change the person I was just to survive and get on. I'm out now trying to rediscover me.
Yeah, well, your life couldn't have turned around. Yeah, it was such a dramatic change for your life.
Yes.
Tell us about your life, because you were living the life like most people.
Oh, I was just normal life, working, looking after my daughter, wonderful family, very family orientated, just doing the usual mum stuff, and that was my life up until the accident.
And I would imagine, like everyone else, you don't think you're going to end up in jail.
No.
And when you do see people in jail, you think, well, jails are built for bad people.
Most definitely. The time that I'd spent in there, I've seen some horrendous things happen. It's not my world, and it's changed forever.
Yeah. Yeah. The way you look at things or the person you are?
Both.
Yeah.
Both. You have a lot of time to think while you're in there. What could have been, what might have been, and what is reality. And reality was that I had to get through 2 years of feeling alone, regretful, remorseful, embarrassed, ashamed, and try and come out the other end.
Yeah, and you're ticking off all those emotions, and I think you're probably dealing with the damage that was caused to the family that you hit.
Most definitely. I live with that guilt every day. I'm sorry.
No, take your time. Look, and I'll say it up front, and I'll say it again. This is a heavy topic, and I appreciate you coming on to talk to us about it.
Oh, God. Sorry.
You don't have to say sorry.
Oh, God. Okay. I'm right now. What did you say?
I was saying with the family, that must be playing on your mind. Outside of everything that's happened to you personally, your time in jail and the impact it's had on your family, the guilt that you must carry, knowing that your actions caused the injuries to the four people.
Yes. I'm devastated that my actions have caused such horrific injuries. I would never dream of this ever happening. It's guilt that is intense. There are triggers that also go along with that guilt, and I've just got to try and find a way forward, and my story being out there, just hope that nobody does exactly what I've done.
Well, yeah, and we will keep raising that, because that's, I think, and what I've learnt, the more I see in life, that we can all sit here in judgment and go, well, that person shouldn't have done that. But everyone does make mistakes, and I think it's a real wake-up call to people. Like, I think if we're all honest, we all know people that get behind the wheel and drive when they probably shouldn't have, because they've had a big night the night before or whatever. And this is just a warning of what can actually happen. Yeah,
I don't think people give enough thought to even getting in the car the morning after a night out.
Yeah.
The alcohol content continues to grow over the time that you've been home until when you're going to go out again. I was very naive, I think.
Yep.
Drinking cocktails, you don't think about the amount of alcohol that's in them.
Yeah.
And not eating as well.
It all plays a part, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So tell me about the day. So your life was, for all intents and purposes, as you described, you're a mother, you were raising your daughter and getting on with life. The day this incident happened, talk us through the day so people understand how dramatic a life can change in a matter of moments.
I'd been out shopping for the day. A friend and myself decided that we would call in and have a late lunch, early dinner. I ran into other friends who were at the same place that we were and got chatting to them. Didn't sit down and have a proper lunch. It was just finger food, few cocktails, a wine, and came home. I had Sophie at home, and then we had a wedding we were supposed to go to the weekend after, and I jumped in the car, went down to get some cigarettes, and 30 seconds from my house was where the accident happened. And I had to get out of my car, and the realisation of what I did was horrendous. And I had Sophie actually calling me saying, "Mama, there's a helicopter around. Are you okay?" And at that point in time, I I didn't even know what to say to her. I said, there has been an accident, but a friend will be there very soon to take care of you.
So this was just down the road from your house?
Yeah.
Yeah.
30 seconds.
Yeah. The day that you described is a fairly a typical day that a lot of people would have had out for shopping, catch up with a friend, have lunch, go home. And then that decision, and I would imagine you play that over and over in your mind about if only I didn't, if only.
I certainly do. It's constant. It's a constant thought that goes through my head, and just how easy a great day can turn into the most horrific, horrible time of your life.
Yeah, yeah. And is there any indications? I know sometimes when people's life go off track, there's warning signs, or you see something building up. You're living life a little bit loose, and and it's almost like most people get a clip, but it's not as dramatic circumstances as the situation you found yourself in. Was there any indications that you were taking risks, or?
No, I felt fine, and I just didn't even consider the consequences of getting in my car and doing something simple.
Yeah. Well, I think, and I'd like to say this because I did a lot of traffic matters in the police, but I see the consequences of situations like yourself. I think most people, when you see people umming and ahhing, should I drive, shouldn't I drive, they're worried about the police pulling them over and them getting charged with drink driving. But that is just a smidgen of what can happen if you're behind the wheel of a car when you've been drinking. And your situation the situation you found yourself in is the potential consequences of what can occur.
It changes life completely.
Yeah.
You shut down.
Yeah. But your concern getting in, I might be over. Well, if I got pulled over, I'll get a fine, whatever. But you don't consider that I could hit 4 people and seriously injure them, do you?
No, not at all. New complexes as well that are being built around Sydney, a lot don't have curb and guttering.
Yeah.
So it was basically just dirt.
Right.
To the bitumen.
Where the accident occurred.
Yeah, it was dark.
Yep.
No lighting had been put in. So I did not see them.
So that was a situation. I just sort of try to describe it so we understand exactly what you went through. You're driving along. You're 30 seconds from home, so 100 metres, a couple of 100 metres from home, and there was a family of 4, 3 adults and a 4-year-old child walking on the side of the road, and you didn't see them, and then you would have felt the impact.
I felt the impact. I didn't know what had happened though.
Yeah.
Until I got out of my car, and I just stood there. It was like time stopped. And because of the position, there was a crest, so I decided to get back into my car and move it off the road. And I stood there. I know now that I was in shock, and just couldn't believe what I'd just done.
Describe to me what you saw.
I saw the 4 people on the road, and there was a little girl's shoe near me. People had then stopped to help. I also called the ambulance, and the lights, the sirens, the helicopter landing, it was all my fault. It is really difficult to talk about it, but it's real and it can happen to anyone.
Mm.
It was the emotion then took over. I pictured, that I had these people laying in front of me, and as I said, to think that I created that carnage, it was really hard.
Yeah. Look, I know how hard it is for you, and we discussed this before starting the podcast, that you would talk about that. I know how hard it is. I can see it, but I can hear it in your voice for the listeners that reliving that situation. But the importance of telling that situation is so people can understand what can happen.
Yes.
And you can't understand it better than someone that's been through that situation.
Yeah.
And there was with the people, they were from Hong Kong, I believe,
yes.
and they were on holidays, and they had been out sightseeing and were coming home. There was a 45-year-old man, a 44-year-old woman, a 4-year-old child, and a 55-year-old woman, and they were all walking together.
Yes.
They, after the accident, they were unconscious, all four?
Yes.
What did you do? You had police turn up, ambulance turn up, and did the police take you aside, or what happened?
Yes, the police took me aside, breath tested me. There was ambulances, fire engines, the helicopter landing, and then I did my alcohol test. They took my license straight away, and while I was still standing there, it was just completely busy. I spoke to no one. I just looked at what I had done. And, if I can put it this way, we've all watched plenty of shows where this is filmed and there are actors, but when it happens to you and you have created the whole scenario by one stupid act, it's a decision that I wish that I could have taken back, but it was a lot to take in,
Well, I've been to scenes not dissimilar to that, and it's chaotic and it's intense. And if you're there and the realisation that you caused this, it must be the impact it has on you. You said you're in a state of shock after. There would have been a numbness, I would imagine.
Yes, there was. Your emotions just shut down. Your feeling, my thought was just as though I'd taken a picture of what had happened. That, and it's constantly with me. Yeah, it's just devastating.
Yeah. Look, and I'm putting this up front so people understand what we're dealing with, what we're talking about here, and I do know how difficult it is for you to talk about it, and I apologise putting you through that again. But to understand the consequences of your actions, we need to talk about what actually happened. And like the 55-year-old woman, she suffered significant injuries to her lower limbs. The 4-year-old child suffered bleeding on the brain and a collapsed lung. So they were horrific injuries that happened to the 4 people.
Yes, they were.
Okay. What happened after you were breathalyzed by the police?
I'm not sure of the time frame,
Yeah.
but I was then taken to Westmead Hospital for urine and blood test. Then I was transported after that back to the police station, fingerprinted, put in a cell. Sergeant saying to me, "Do you realise what you've done?" And I said, "Yes, I do. I realise now that with trauma, you don't need to be standing there crying as your body processes everything that happens. It's the physical plus the mental, but you're numb, totally numb."
So having gone through what you experienced there and all the guilt that you felt, then you're in the police station, which would be an unusual experience for you.
Most definitely.
And being fingerprinted.
Yeah.
You're getting your photo taken and then placed in a cell.
In a cell. Just, yeah.
Again, as a cautionary tale to explain to people how quickly your life can change so dramatically. And it's not you saying, "Oh, me, oh, my, look what's happened to me." But this is the reality of what can occur.
Yes. And I think, we all do need wake-up calls. And it is easy and you never think that it will happen to you. But my life, as I knew it prior to the accident, has like I've totally changed. My life has changed.
It's basically your life before the accident and post the accident.
Most definitely, yeah. And it's not just me.
Yeah.
It is my family.
Yes.
My friends.
Yeah.
My work. I can't drive.
Yeah.
And you just don't think of the effects, the domino effect that it has on your life with everything that you do.
Yeah. And that's all on top of the deeply personal, emotional guilt that you carry from the accident. And then you've got all these subsequent other parts of your life that's been turned upside down. At the police station, you're placed in a cell. Were you charged and then granted bail?
Yes, not until 5:30 the next morning.
Yep.
I went home. My parents were actually on their way back from a holiday that they take annually from Port Macquarie. They'd heard about the accident on the radio.
Yep.
And did think, wow, that mustn't be too far from my home.
Yeah.
Not for 1 minute thinking that
you're involved.
It was me that caused it. I then had my sisters come over and I had to break the news to Mum and Dad of what I'd done, taking into consideration, my parents are in their 80s. The shock would have been enough for them.
How is that? Because I'm not even considering that. I've obviously been thinking about what occurred and how you must have felt, but that's another layer that I hadn't considered. And this is where you telling your story is sort of getting it out there. But telling people like guess what I did, Mum. Guess what I did, Dad. It's
It was on the news, paper as well, and I had to tell my parents. My sisters decided that they would go and tell them first, as they'd only just driven in the driveway to their house, and when they came over, I just told them how sorry I was, and for me, you come from a loving family, and the disappointment that I even felt in myself I couldn't measure because it was so extreme. I then told my parents that I wanted to take my own life.
Yeah.
That night we went to Westmead Hospital again, and they wouldn't admit me into the psych ward.
Right.
As they said that it would probably be more detrimental, that a private facility would help me. So we started calling, and, you know, there's weeks waiting list to get in. And I just said, if you don't do it, I won't be able to live with myself and what I'd done.
And that's another part of it. And you've raised it. I wasn't going to ask, but I now that you've raised it, that you were looking at that as a way out of the shame, the guilt, and everything else.
Yeah. I wasn't even thinking of my family. I was just thinking of a quick way for me to not feel.
End the pain.
End the pain.
So did you get the professional help?
Yes. There was a private facility that I went to. It was a drug and alcohol facility predominantly, but because my case was urgent, a doctor took me under his wing, and I was in there for 5.5 weeks.
And that, without going into all the details of the treatment you received, but that was beneficial for you?
Yes, it was. It was. I had care 24/7. Spoke to people on site, psychologists, psychiatrists, so that was beneficial at that time.
Right. And what sort of advice were they to help you cope with it, to come to terms with the consequences of your actions?
It was them trying to get through to me that it was an accident. You didn't intend to do this. I've had people say, you know, it was an accident,
yeah.
But I got into my car and I drove.
Yeah.
It was a decision that I made, and it had devastating consequences to the family. And, you know, my thought process was so muddled and jumbled. I just didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
The sentence, it was an accident, just doesn't cut it and never will.
Yeah, you're taking ownership. That was your decision. But I've got to say, Lisa, like sitting opposite you, and I've sat opposite a lot of people that have done time in jail and spent the majority of their life in jail, and they're committing crimes. They're bad. And I find it easier talking to them because they make a conscious decision now, whether it's that they've grown up in a tough environment, but they made a conscious decision, yeah, we're going to go rob that bank, or we're going to do this. And it's easy to talk about this. I think, and this is just from my personal point of view, it's showing that, whether it's me or someone close to me could be caught up in that same type of situation, the consequences of your actions. And I'm not just talking drink driving. I'm talking if someone was texting on the telephone and the same type of accident happened. So I think people listening to this, that, rather than sit in judgment of what's occurred, understand that people do make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes, their consequences are extreme.
Most definitely. Even on the weekend, I heard a story of my sister's friend who had been done DUI mid-range.
Yeah.
And I just want to get it out there that it can happen in a split second. And the consequences that
I think the consequences are incomprehensible.
They are, because it just doesn't stop.
And talking, and it's coming to the realisation that the thing that we fear the most was that the police would pull you over and you're going to lose your licence and get a significant fine. But that's just the start of it, isn't it?
Yes.
You wouldn't be sitting here if you were pulled over by a RBT and fined and lost your licence for drink driving. You would have been one of thousands,
yes,
if not more. I don't know, tens of thousands. I don't know the numbers, but once you're in that zone, you are a split second away from causing the calamity that you caused.
Yes.
Yeah.
A split second.
So the process after the accident, and then I would imagine you'd be, trying to find out how the victims of the accident were.
Most definitely, yeah.
And it wasn't all good news for you. So
no, it wasn't. It wasn't. It was my action that caused it all. The psychological impact, the physical impact on them, the emotional impact, everything I caused.
And what about your friends and family? How are they dealing with the situation? Because it would have impacted on them as well.
I must say my family are amazing. We have a very close-knit family. I don't have uncles and aunties. We've got a beautiful relationship. I have 2 sisters and their children. And that's what you don't think about is, even my daughter going to school.
Yeah.
With this. And
how old was your daughter at the time?
She was 14.
Yeah, it's a difficult time at best.
Difficult time.
Yeah.
People knowing that it was me, trying to get in contact with my family, and all we did was just basically cocoon ourselves.
Yeah.
And just there were days that I seriously took just 15 minutes at a time.
So that was your process of working through it, just get through the next 15 minutes?
Yep. Yeah.
Because you also had another layer to it, isn't it? Your ex, Dennis Fitzgerald, the Parramatta CEO, a very high-profile person, always in the news. But that's the first I heard of your case was because the media were reporting it because you were the ex-wife of Dennis Fitzgerald.
Yes.
And that added more, I would imagine, more pressure to you.
Oh, it did. And for him, he was used to the media. I wasn't. Prior to the accident, although being to some, great events that the football community have held over the years, that there was one photo of me on the internet.
Yeah.
I didn't like my photo being taken. I didn't want it up on show. And I did a very good job of escaping all of that. But now I'm everywhere when you Google my name.
Yeah.
It didn't help. Then when the media figured out Dennis, and then, the support that he even got and the support that his friends gave me was amazing. I think you go into a survival mode, and as I said, sometimes it was just 15 minutes at a time.
Yeah.
I was medicated when I went to the centre and came home with the same medication. It didn't fix my problem. My problems.
Yeah. Were you working at the time?
I was doing a little bit of hairdressing.
Yeah.
but basically concentrating on Sophie and her schooling.
And how did that? Because from the time of the accident to when it was finalised at court, how long was?
15 months.
Okay, in those 15 months, what you had time getting help for your mental health issue. Then you're sitting and waiting.
Yes.
I'm wondering what the consequences. Now, I would imagine the first discussions you had with a legal person, a solicitor, they would have forewarned the possibility of going to prison.
They did, along with that advice. I had several conversations with the psychologists. I had to have a report done.
Yeah.
For the court, and
a pre-sentence report.
Pre-sentence report.
And for people, most people will be aware of it, but the pre-sentence report, if the judge or magistrate is considering a custodial sentence, quite often they call for a pre-sentence report in that what effect it would have on the person they're considering sending to prison and whether they're suitable to send them to prison.
Yes. He had actually put that he thought that it would do me a disservice. But then if I was the family, I'd want me in jail too.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I think it really shows that you do acknowledge your actions cause these injuries. So you're saying if you were the family of the victims, you'd want the driver sent to prison? Most
definitely.
Yeah, and I think that's most people take that attitude, even though we know it's an accident. It wasn't a conscious decision to injure those person, but trying to make consequences from actions like yours and make people aware of it.
Yeah, I'd heard that, in the past there had been people given intensive corrections orders.
Yep.
And I had that hope just in my head that may be possible because I hadn't been in trouble before. It was only the week before I went to court for sentencing that I thought, right, you're going.
Going in. It's, I would imagine, hard to come to terms with, like I've been going through court myself on minor matters, but the consideration, well, they could actually send you to prison, and you're thinking, I would imagine, am I really that bad that I need to be locked away from society to protect people?
Yes. Well, I think the majority of people would think that prisons for murderers.
Yeah. The people that we need to protect
that we
society.
Need. Yes.
From. Yeah.
But not me. Like I knew I was going, and my psychologist had briefly prepared me for it, but nothing can prepare you.
Yeah. With the actual charges, you were charged with 2 counts of dangerous driving, occasion grievous bodily harm, and 2 counts of causing actual bodily harm by misconduct. And you had a blood alcohol reading of 0.113, which is mid-range.
Yes.
Yeah. So with those charges, 15 months it went through the court. Now, was that for getting reports, pre-sentence reports, that type of thing? What was the delay? Because people probably don't understand how it takes 15 months.
Yeah, there were a couple of mentions that I had to attend, and then it was getting reports done. It was I didn't even understand the system.
Yeah.
So I was under the impression that would happen pretty much straight away, but in that 15 months, I really didn't do too much at all. I sat in my house. Because I didn't feel worthy of having my life.
And talk us through that, because that's a pretty heavy statement.
Yeah, I'd go out just for groceries. I would try to disguise myself the best way that I could, taking in consideration the there were shops underneath the apartment building that I was at, so my face was regular there, and just I didn't feel that I deserved to be happy, to be having a laugh, to be going out with friends. So I pulled back from everything.
Yeah, well, that to me, and I'm obviously not a psychologist, but it shows me that you have a conscience and that you're thinking you don't deserve happiness because of the damage you've inflicted because of your actions.
Correct.
But it's a hard way to live life, isn't it? If you can't, you need that balance, and it's a hard way to live life if you've been that hard on yourself that I don't want to go out because someone might see me smiling and then they think it hasn't impacted on me.
Yeah. There wasn't a lot of smiling that happened in that 15 months and even afterwards. The fact that I felt that so ashamed of what I'd done. You know, I couldn't even walk out my front door hardly. It was, the accident happened on the corner of where the shops were.
So it's very much a local incident and everyone would have known who you are. And
yes.
So when you're walking down the street, you're feeling the eyes on you, even if they're not looking directly at you, you feel.
Yes.
That,
yeah, I had neighbours knock on the door the next morning and come in after the accident and they just said, you know, was it you? And I just said yes. You know, that they were there for support, but I didn't feel like I needed support because I wasn't worthy of any of it.
So you just pushed them away?
So I just pushed them away. Yeah.
It's a hard path to walk along.
Yeah, yeah.
So with the sentencing, and I just from an article that was written about it, because there was a fair bit about it, but a judge said while Mottram had suffered mental health problems following the breakdown of a marriage with Mr. Fitzgerald in 2017, that does not lessen her moral culpability in any way. Drinking excessively is not a crime, Judge Smith told the court. It was the decision to drive while intoxicated, text while driving, and continue to do so even after swerving that lie at the heart of her culpability.
Mm.
So he's taking it all into account.
Yep. Yep.
Before you went to court for the sentencing, you're considering that you would have been advised that you could be going to jail, and the comment I've heard solicitors say to people in those situations, you better pack your toothbrush, and that's sort of a way of sort of getting that message across that you might go to jail. From a person who would have her whole life, because you're in your early 50s, 50 at the time,
yep.
Never ever considered the possibility of you going to jail, and then the realisation that you're going to court, and depending on what the judge decides, you may or may not be coming home.
Mm.
How did you prepare yourself for that, physically, mentally?
Oh, physically, my body was it was shot. I was so I was tired because I wasn't sleeping. There were days that I still cried. I saw a friend of mine the week before the sentencing, and she's a solicitor, and I just said, in all honesty, what do you think will happen? And she said, I think you'll be going. So I looked around my apartment and I thought, I can't pack this up.
Yeah.
I can't do it. My life, my daughter.
So your daughter was 15, 16 at the time?
Yeah, she was, 15.
Yeah.
15. By this stage she was with her dad, and started at a new school.
Yep.
And
that was all as a result of the accident?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. You know, there were months that she disliked me immensely, and I had ruined her life as well.
Yeah.
You know, we do now after a lot of time, but, you know, then we had an amazing relationship. And the impact that it had on her, my mum and dad, and my sisters, I suppose. It's
anyone that close to you, because if people are close to you, that they don't want to see you suffering.
Yes.
And I would imagine it was painful in every way for them.
The day of sentencing, I didn't want any of my friends to be present.
Yeah.
My dad came and one of my sisters. I didn't want my mum there. I didn't think that she would cope with the day. Yeah, and then
so
the judge had read out, and I didn't even hear. I bits and pieces were taken in, but not a lot.
Just prior to the judge handing down his decision, did you get all your affairs in order? Like, you know, you said you didn't want to pack your house up. Like, you potentially go into jail. Who's going to pay the electricity bills? Who's going to feed the cat? You know, just simple things like this. Who's going to take the food out of the fridge?
Most definitely. All
that sort of stuff. Is that what goes through your mind in those situations?
Look, it was, but I had to hang on to a slight, maybe I'm not going.
Yeah.
So I still wanted to be able to eventually come home to my home.
You thought, I can't be that bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not like your traditional criminal.
Yeah. And why does society need to lock me up to protect society? I would imagine that would go through your mind. What about, from a personal point of view, the concern or the fear going to prison? Like, prison's a scary place, and that's for hardened crooks, but someone that hasn't seen that side of life. Before you went for your sentencing, did anyone give you advice on how to survive in prison?
No. None. It was...
Did you know anyone that had been to prison?
No.
Yeah.
No. You know, TV shows...
Yeah.
But it makes it look like a picnic.
Yeah.
After the sentencing was handed down, I was handcuffed and then taken down to the cells. I know that I saw my barrister and my solicitor. I had no idea what they told me. I can remember then collapsing and then just being treated so terribly.
Yeah.
And it was, a lot of it was a blur, because I think I was shocked, but in another way I was happy that it was all over.
So reliving that moment, but when the judge handed down his decision, you would have been asked to stand.
I was.
And he would outline his reasons and found the offences proven. And then I think you were sentenced to 4 years, non-parole 2-year period.
Correct.
Talk to me on that, if you can remember.
All I can remember was staring at my dad and my sister.
Yeah.
2 years. It is a long time, but it's what I got punished with.
That's interesting you say that. And I know in the conversations we've had before and what you said about if it was your family that were injured in that way, you'd want sentencing. So it's almost like you couldn't cry poor or, oh me, oh my, why have you sent? It was almost like, I deserve this.
Yes. Oh, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah.
This is the decision that's been made. And then I had to go through the process then.
Yeah.
try not to think, but just go through the process.
Yeah. Well, look, I think we might take a break here. I realise how hard it is talking about what we're talking about. When we get back into part 2, I want to talk about step by step what it was like going into prison, and for someone that never considered that was a path that your life might take, and for someone that had absolutely no experience, didn't have any knowledge of what goes on in the prison, how frightening that is. And again, that's part of the message that comes across. These are the consequences. We've heard about how you carry this guilt, and you'll carry the guilt for the rest of your life because of the injuries that you cause the people. But I think it's important people also understand the realities of what going to prison is. So let's take a break, and when we come back in part 2, we'll talk about that.
Okay.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.